Welcome to another episode of Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. I'm here with my best buddy, Matt.
Hi, Gary.
My second best co-host ever.
Yeah.
And today we have our guest is Representative George Lambert. I don't even know what town you're from.
I'm from Litchfield. I represent
Litchfield.
Hudson, Litchfield, and Pelham.
Okay, he's from Litchfield. So that's going to be redistricted. You'll probably be just representing Litchfield next time.
Yes, probably.
Yes. It's pretty good for somebody from Litchfield to get in because the Hudson people were pretty aggravated with Litchfield a while ago for something they did.
Really?
Yeah, it was over quite a few years ago, it was over the tolls. The representative at the time, this is back, I think, in 2000, said, well, we don't really care if you have to pay tolls. We don't. And then the court redistricted Litchfield with Hudson, at which point he lost his seat because he was quoted.
Yeah.
Which is always a bad thing. Never say anything, and you won't be it won't be used against you.
Right.
So anyway, Matt, I was out shooting, and I wanted to show you a target I got done. I was shooting. My eyes are bad, so I was pretty impressed.
Yeah.
If you can, if they could cue that picture.
Yeah, I'm curious to see this. Oh my goodness!
That's
Wow.
pretty good. I think that's pretty darn good for shooting with for a blind guy.
Yes.
That was about
Wow.
25 yards with a 22.
Well, you've obviously had some practice.
Yeah. I thought that was pretty awesome.
Uh-huh.
Thank you guys.
Well done, Gary. Well done.
Oh.
Now you just need a head you can mount. Do you have that? Do you have
A donkey head?
Yeah. Do you have heads mounted above your fireplace or something?
Yeah, but they're mostly illegal.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I really can't mention it on the air.
I understand. Yes.
You
Yeah.
know.
Right.
Anyway, I posted something.
You guys didn't hear that.
No, I posted something online this morning. I actually copied and pasted from somebody else, so I thought was absolutely wonderful. It's some people are like slinkies. They're really good for nothing, but they still bring a smile to your face when you push them down a stairwell.
Yes, I saw that. I thought
Yeah, that was very
good.
offensive. I was ashamed of myself for posting it.
Really?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I felt really badly most of the time. Anyway, Representative Lambert,
Hello, sir.
would you be so kind as to tell a little bit about yourself, how you got into politics? Oh, for the audience, we're talking about redress of grievances. If you go back into the Bible, you will hear the story of a woman who kept going to a judge and saying she wanted satisfaction for an injustice done to her, and kept going back to him. Finally, he says, I don't fear God or anything else, but I am so sick of seeing you, I will take care of this. And he went, and I think it was a problem with her landlord. I don't remember what the specifics were.
Yeah.
But that is a redress of grievances. In other words, when you, as a citizen, you have the right to approach your government when you've tried everything else.
Right.
Like, say you've got a problem with your landlord, but typically it's more appropriate for you to have difficulty with, say, this. If you lived in Manchester with a city, say the city did something to your property and does not wish to fix it,
Sure.
and you have evidence that they messed it up, or in the court system, if the courts mistreat you, you should have some avenue by which to approach the government and try to get remedy for this a solution to the problem.
Yeah.
And that's what redress of grievances is, and that's in Article 1 of the Bill of Rights. But anyway, that's what we're talking about today, and except for my silliness, I include that too. But if you want to tell us a little bit how you got involved in politics, obviously the $100 a year is very tempting as a state legislator, but there's might be more to it than that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more to it than that.
And the food.
Yeah,
Free
everyone
food.
tells me about the free food, but, no offense, but we have the wrong lobbyists or something, because it hasn't been that good.
Oh, really?
Yeah, not so much.
Gary gets lasagna.
I got lasagna a
Sometimes.
few weeks ago.
Yeah. No, it's definitely not about the food.
Oh.
Okay.
I grew up, and I was passionate about government. I mean, my dad was a constitutionalist. He ran for sheriff in Hillsborough County in 1976. Lost horribly.
Yeah.
But in the process, he went out and just through the process of trying to get elected, he changed the dialogue of the election and changed the behavior in the city. And that was one of the proudest things he ever did.
Yeah.
I told that story at his funeral. And somebody said, well, what are you doing about it? And I got a little teary-eyed, and I said, you know what?
Good point.
The next, I said, the next time I have an opportunity to put my name on a ballot, I'll do it. And my neighbor got all excited, and he said, funny, that's tomorrow.
Huh.
And
Oh,
the
no
next,
way.
yep, it was. And so the next day I went out and I actually signed up and registered to run for selectman. I ran for selectman in Litchfield. When I started, I was the notorious troublemaker because I had this like really strange idea about government, which is it should be accountable, open, and accessible to the people. Now, a selectman who actually cares about stuff like
All right,
that.
let's not get carried away here.
SWAT team's going to come through the window.
I know, huh? Oh boy. Oh boy. Awkward.
And so in my first week, the guy who was the chairman of the board says it'll take you about a year to figure out what's going on in the language and everything. He says you just sit right there and vote the
Mind your own business
vote the way I
and
tell you,
so on.
and you'll be fine. About 15 minutes later, he found out that that was not sort of the way that I thought about government.
Yeah.
And there were jokes all over town that were, it's the Monday night circus. Because the selectmen were fighting. And we were fighting about things like doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And doing business as usual versus the business of the people. And so I thought that was interesting. I ran for, I served my first term and I ran again. And I said, well, this is interesting. And I started taking some classes about running for state rep. I worked on a campaign called Stop the Drunken Sailors and sort of learned about state spending. And I was like, wow, there are so many new taxes and fees and this stuff, and what's the point and who's accountable?
Right.
And I said, well, I'm going to run. And I ran for state rep. And when I got up there, there's so much you don't know. And they're like, what do you want for committee assignments? And I made some choices. And then I heard that we had a committee called Redress of Grievances. And I said, stop the presses. I called the Speaker of the House, and I said, look, you have this new committee called Redress of Grievances. And that's actually my first choice. And he said, why? And I said, well, because until the government is actually accountable to the people and the Constitution and the rule of law, not the rule of the courts,
Right.
but the rule of law, the way we explain it to our fourth graders, we're doing the wrong thing. And if you get caught in the system, how do you get out?
Right.
And I said, I want to be in the place where somebody who says I got caught in the system can get answers.
Yeah.
So it was my first choice. I got assigned. I've been an activist on this thing called On the Job Means On the Record. I don't know if you guys have heard about the wiretapping problems in the state, where people were getting arrested and charged with felony wiretapping for hitting the record button on a tape recorder.
Yeah.
Whoa. He's really going for the gold.
I know.
I know.
I know.
We, could probably,
So-
we might as well just call the cops now.
Oh, they're already on the way,
So
I'm sure.
8 years ago, I went out and started this campaign called On the Job Means On the Record, and I said, basically, if a police officer is talking to you and you record him, anything that you say to him is subject to be heard in court. So did he ever have an expectation of privacy? The law seems pretty clear to me. You don't, because if you have to testify to whatever it was in court under oath, where was the expectation of privacy to begin with?
Right.
The law is ridiculous.
Right.
So I tried to change it. And what I found is it's hard to change. So when I got up here, I said, well, let's go and get to the place where we can hear complaints like that. I got assigned to Redress of Grievances, which was new. There wasn't a lot of structure. Our chairman, Representative Chairman Ingramson, is a great guy who says, I care about the people and their issues. We're going to hear them, whatever they are. So a state representative will file a Redress of Grievances petition on behalf of a citizen, and they say, we have a complaint. And our complaint is the government didn't do what it was supposed to do in this way, and we're asking for X, Y, and Z. And quite often, the requests for what they want, we can't do, because we can't go and fix necessarily you tore down my house. What we might be able to do is put a bill before the House saying, we illegally destroyed someone's house, maybe we need to pay for it. So we have to look at whether or not the redress request can be dealt with by the House.
Yeah.
But we look for systemic flaws that have gotten lost in the system. We have laws on the books, and they're big. But just to put it in context, I don't know if you guys have any idea how many pages of legislation there are in the next session. But right now there are 11,000 pages. If you're going to read every bill that's going to committee, it's 11,000 pages. Okay. Now, my wife read Atlas Shrugged this year.
Yeah.
Okay. It was 1,400 pages. It took a long time.
Yeah.
11,000 means that as a state rep, you can't read them all, so we really trust committees to filter them. But we have to prioritize. So there are things that get lost. There are systemic failures in our government because we haven't dealt with issues of accountability. We have these rules that we've put into place, like RSA 91A. It's the right to know law. The government should be accountable to the people at all times, is what our Constitution says, but it doesn't say how. So we have this RSA, which says the public has the right to know. We use the right to know law to grant access to information, but we also use it to shield information.
Yeah.
So we have a situation that I heard a subcommittee hearing on the other day, which was we have a police chief who's also the chairman of the school board. There's a complaint against somebody who works for the school. The question that comes up is, if the police department this guy's in charge of is accountable to the school that this guy is the chairman of the board of the school board on, did the person who was complaining really get a fair shot? Which
Right.
identifies a potential issue in government, which
Right.
is, should a police agency, when there's a conflict of interest, go out of agency for investigation?
Right.
This is a great opportunity for our committee to bring in a change to the law that guarantees that right to due process of all citizens.
Yeah.
Nobody caught it. But when somebody comes in and says, I have this complaint, it's an opportunity for us to identify a proposed solution, tell the House that we believe this needs to be changed, and submit a bill.
Right. I know that last year, actually it was 2 years ago, a few of us tried to get a committee of grievances, which would be consistent with the Constitution.
Now, the Constitution doesn't say you have to have a committee. What they say is that you have to accept them.
Right.
You just put them in a box and you say, we accepted them. Next. You don't have to do anything with them. So for years we haven't done anything, but now we have a committee that's going to hear them.
Yeah, and Paul was instrumental, and he joins us right now. This is Paul Ingbertson.
Ingridson.
Chairman of the Committee of Redress, and I was just saying how last term they wouldn't even let us meet they put us in the back in the corner in the dark because they didn't even want us to acknowledge that we existed. But we did start hearing grievances last term.
Yeah, it was an interesting conversation that went on between us and sort of, I'd have to say sort of indirectly between us and the Speaker of the House last year. And I have to say that probably the biggest surprise was there was a pushback from the Democrat Party, who are ostensibly the party of the little people and arguably for the injured and that sort of thing. And you'd think this would be a
Well,
logical...
that's how they present themselves.
When they want votes,
Well,
but when they
when they
actually
want
want
votes.
change, I don't know.
So, but I think that I've since concluded that what they actually are interested in primarily is that government should rule and that people should ultimately, be managed, and little people need to just get in their place and all that sort of thing. I mean, I found that it was a very surprising and disappointing thing. But I'm not saying that. If I really thought that, I probably would have been a Democrat. But I guess as it stands, I'm a bleeding heart conservative.
Yeah, that actually, that's actually one of the things I wanted to talk about to you. Paul is as a conservative Republican, and yet he is also an artist and has a studio in Manchester. And I just find those two positions to be a complete contradiction.
Very unusual.
It is. So which is it?
What are you
Well,
hiding under that
I
beard?
I have to tell you, I was in a very conservative organization one day, and I actually worked for them when I was a kid. When I was studying, I worked for them, and a gentleman at some point who eventually began to work for the same organization came in, and he said he saw me, and he said, "That must be so and so." I was with a very conservative guy, and he said, "That must be so and so's liberal son." And it's been going like that ever since. I was in the House when I first came in, and the Democrat came up to me and said, "You should be joining us. You're one of us. You're an artist." She went through the whole thing.
No kidding.
Yes, she. Yeah. So there is a stereotype out there,
That's
believe it or
funny.
not. It's very interesting. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, it's either one or the other. Either you're a conservative or you're an artist. Now, if you're an artist, did you ever spend time at that leper colony over in Peterborough?
Have you ever heard of a conservative artist?
No.
What would a conservative artist be in our generation? It'd be somebody who actually believes in the great principles of the 19th century, for example, and the Michelangelo history, not the modern art and shock your grandmother stuff. The shock your grandmother stuff is the art of the left.
Oh, okay.
You understand? So it's very easy to understand. I'm a conservative in every possible way. I want to conserve the great values of the great arts of man, you know, from a long time back, you know, and the representational side is also more, you know, that sort of traditional background is what you might call conservative. you know.
So like if you were a conservative musician, you would play Bach.
There you go.
But if you
Or
were
country.
Well,
or
yes.
country,
If you were a really conservative musician, you'd play God Bless the USA? Is that what you're saying?
You'd be Lee Greenwood, yes. Hey, I don't want to bury the lead here. You said there's a leper colony?
yeah, Peterborough.
Oh, okay, I didn't know.
Yeah, they have like an artist leper colony.
Oh, I'm going to stay away from there.
Yeah.
Right?
I haven't been there. I don't know.
I don't want to go there.
I'm not, no, I think
when
maybe.
I left, I'd be half the man
I
I
don't know
used
if
to
it's
be.
a leper colony or an Irish colony. It's a McDowell something or.
Oh, the McDowell, yeah. Yeah, I'm
leper
familiar with that.
colony,
Yeah,
McDowell
I've actually
leper
been there. I
colony.
didn't go
Oh.
and attend or
Yeah.
anything. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of communal type thing that you would be comfortable. Anyway, so anyway, I've already asked George to Representative Lambert to talk about a little bit about his how he got involved and how did you get involved in all this? You've been up there for quite a few years, up in Concord, causing trouble.
Well, you could say
what
more
kind-
politely doing the right thing, but causing trouble, I guess, in some cases. We actually.
Well, okay, wait. You've known me for a few years.
Yeah, I know.
How long?
We wouldn't-
am I polite?
Yeah, no. As long as you can get a joke out of it, you're never polite.
Okay.
Yeah, admittedly, Representative Hopper, you are the funniest guy in the House on an average day. Yes.
Yeah, average.
Nothing to the looks or anything. Just
Oh, okay.
no.
Anyway, so tell us how you got kind of involved in what motivated you to run for. I ran for state rep because of the free food.
Oh,
What was your impetus?
oh, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where is that?
What, the free
Exactly.
food?
That's what I said.
Yeah, George doesn't get any either. How do
man.
you rate? You get all the free
Well,
food, it sounds
I
like.
go out and get it from the unions the last two times.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I won't take any of their
Do
food.
they have good food? Yeah. there
Yeah.
is, yeah.
Well, see, I got an iron stomach, so I'm not as concerned about the strychnine and stuff like that.
Yeah, food is food. I mean, you know.
Well, they're up there every time we're in session now. They have this big barbecue.
Oh,
But
yeah.
you know, if you're a Republican who actually eats from there, you end up with your picture online going, you know, so and so Republican eating from the union trough. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I don't care. I don't care.
Hypocrisy.
I
Yeah,
went to the. This past Saturday, I went to the gun show in the morning, and then went over to check out the take a nap on Main Street or sit in or sleep in on Main Street. What the heck is it called?
Oh, you did that?
Occupy New Hampshire?
Occupy.
yeah.
Occupy.
I was there last night.
You were?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I wanted to go down and hear what the people have to say.
Good for
I
you.
did too.
Good for you.
You know, I think as a state rep, we need to hear every single voice
Absolutely.
and understand what the complaints of the people are. I mean, that's why I love redress of grievances.
Yeah.
But all in all, you go down there and you listen to these people, and they're from all sides.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
don't need to agree with them, but I want to hear what they say are the
Yeah.
issues with our state, because unless we're hearing their voices,
Yeah.
we end up in an echo chamber. If I listen to only people who agree with me, I never do the right thing.
Yeah.
I have to think about all their perspectives so I can actually vote the right way.
Yeah.
Because I don't represent Republicans. I'm elected as a Republican. I don't represent Republicans. I represent citizens.
Right.
And if we're not hearing every single one of them, we're going to miss something.
I'm
Yeah.
glad to hear you say that. There isn't enough of that.
How many people were attending that?
There was, I didn't count, you know, it was around 50. I was standing out there. The police were supposed to start arresting people at 11 o'clock. So I don't know, at 10:55, I'm like getting out of the park. I don't need to be arrested. And,
Yeah.
I had meetings this morning at 8:30. I mean,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like,
You don't have
how
time
do
to go to jail.
Right.
Yeah, there was about 40 or 50 of them out there Saturday morning. Definitely represented by the union. Somebody took a picture of me with one of the union ladies there. I asked her to come on the show.
Yeah.
'Cause
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with you. I mean, it is too easy to insulate yourself from opposing opinions and sit around and agree with one another, which is really not that helpful.
You know, I'll tell you, I'm so bothered right now. about this idea, it's us versus them, no matter what group you're in. The press in Manchester is driving me crazy on the
Really?
whole alderman election. We have alderman school board, and apparently there's some Free Staters, people who moved to the state,
Yeah.
who are taking a great deal of grief because they moved here, and they're like going, "We want to participate in government." Let's see.
Yeah.
That's why we have so much in the way of open government. And they're getting hammered because they decided to move here and say, we want to be part of the live free or die state.
Right.
We
I
talk
don't, I
about...
don't, yeah, but that's partially true, but a lot of it is any politician who moves into a state or a town or a city, and it's recently, is always shunned just by virtue of the carpetbagger mentality. So it's not, I don't think.
Good old
necess-
boys, yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, Paul, you were I wanted to get back to where.
Haven't I dodged pretty good so far?
No, you're trying, yeah. But how did you get involved in all this?
My story is a real simple one. I have a rep in my town, or did, who I guess about 12, 14 years ago now, who, when a vote came up in the House regarding a CONCON, a constitutional convention
Right.
of the states, for a balanced budget, was in favor of it. And I contacted him and asked him whether he thought that was a wise thing to do, given that a CONCON could easily become a very serious tragedy. And I pointed out that I had serious suspicions that that the minds of those people running a CONCON today might be a little less liberty-oriented, and that might cause a
little bit
problem for the
cons-
future of
less
America.
constitutional.
And he disagreed with me, and he said, no, we're great people today, and all blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And as it turned out,
Just
not
ask
very
us.
many years later, I found out that he was actually a Democrat who came to move into my town, which is 2-1 Republican, and was told if he wanted to be in office, he should switch to Republican and run. And it turns out that we had 2 Democrats in my town who were both feigning Republican standards. So it was a very easy thing to kick into, for me to actually participate in. And but what really moved those guys, and this is another story entirely, is the scorecard and the HRA, the House Republican Alliance and the scorecard. It showed that one guy had been there 30 years and had been on the finance committee here in the state, which was all going towards spending, was voting 4% of the time with the Republican Party. And I asked the Speaker of the House at the time when I came in, I said, did you know that this was the case with him? And he said, I'm surprised it was that high. And the other one was about 40% of the time with the party.
Now, what year did you get in?
03, I believe, was my first year.
03. So
Yep.
really?
This is my 9th year. This is my 5th term.
Okay. So that's why I missed, because I was in 2000, and then won in 2002, and then lost in 4. So you came in on 4, or you came in on 2.
I came in, I believe, on 2.
So
Would that
that
be right? Would that be right?
So
Yeah,
you-
no, it'd be
okay,
2.
So you would
yeah.
have been, I
03
don't
was a-
remember you from that. I remember I basically got to know you over, maybe I knew you back then, I don't know.
If you were in the HRA, you would have
Oh, yeah.
met me then.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
I used to help write, I did, I got 100%.
Really?
Oh,
Yeah, well, 'cause,
1 year or every year?
I think it was the first 2 years, because I helped pick
That's-
out which ones.
that's because there were no right to work votes.
Oh, there you go.
Can you guys clarify what? Because I'm a little
Okay,
confused.
yeah, that's, you're absolutely right. The HRA scorecard is the House Republican Alliance. It's the wing of the Republican Party that actually believes in the Constitution and moral responsibility, and scores, keeps track of bills that that are relative to the Constitution, morality, and things like that.
well, the
Yeah.
Republican platform
and the
is,
Republican platform.
Okay.
is a measuring point, yeah.
And,
Okay.
and any bill that intersects that plane of the goal, we score. And if you voted against it, this is your score. And then, if you vote for,
Right, right.
and we just keep track.
Oh, okay. Now, is this published somewhere?
Yeah,
or-
it's online.
Oh, okay.
You
House
can
Republican Alliance,
You can do.
Okay.
type that in.
You
Yeah.
can do a Google search for House Republican, New Hampshire House Republican Alliance. It'll come up.
Yeah.
The scorecard's in there.
Oh, interesting.
And it's funny because you sit in the back of the room when the scorecard comes out, and people come up and say, "Hey, I did pretty good, huh?"
Well, Representative Mirsky, and you're getting pushed out of this for a second because of the old history, but Representative Mirsky came in with a bunch of guys, Steve Winters, some guys are in the House now, and when he came in, he said, we said, these are terrible votes. You know, and they're all going the wrong way. And he said, what's going on here? Who are these people? And so he was trying to call a roll call. Couldn't figure out how to do it. They hadn't called him in years and years, apparently, except on very rare occasions for political purposes or whatever. And so he finally figured out that you had to get 10 people to stand with you. You get up and scream roll call, and then 10 people, you had to organize 10 people to get up with you or have papers signed that 10 people would stand with you to get a roll call. And that started, like 14 years ago, for sort of like the first time. And so none of these guys that were in our towns were being measured as to where they actually stood vis-a-vis the Republican Party or the Constitution, or one of the issues is just simply frugality, low taxes, low spending.
Yeah.
But so isn't that amazing? And so that's why my guys in my town suddenly got uncomfortable with being in office. They actually began to realize that people might actually read a scorecard. So it's been very effective, yeah.
Yeah.
It was actually kind of funny. My freshman year, I asked for roll call, and 10 people got up and said, "Yeah, we'll do that." And the electric. Right now it's electric. You just press red or green for or against, and it didn't work. So Karen Wadsworth, who was the clerk of the House, said, "Representative Hopper, do you still want me to do a roll call?" But it was an important vote. I felt like a jerk. I says, "Well, yeah, I do."
Yep.
So she had to go through the list. Representative Avery,
Yeah.
yes.
Do
She
you-
had to go
do you-
through a list of 400.
Do you remember what the issue was?
No.
You've forgotten? I was there.
Oh, you were?
This is parental notification.
Oh,
It
what?
was the first passage of parental notification. And I tell you what, I do not believe it would have passed if there had not been that voice roll call.
You saved the day.
I did.
I tell you, I
Sounds
believe
like
that.
it.
Because you watch the wind when you hear a name, everybody know who the Republican was, and all the alphabetical guys right behind that person would get in line, knowing that there'd be trouble. You knew it was happening, and there were waves, and people were being swept up in these waves as Republicans that would otherwise have been voting would have been questionable on the
I did
issue.
that?
That was
Pretty good. I must have
Good
got
for
free
you.
food that day or something.
Yeah, probably. You probably got
No.
some lasagna.
I didn't even know you did it. I didn't know who did it.
No, that was me.
That was
Yeah.
the only time it's ever happened since I've been here.
Yeah, that was
It was the only
it's
time,
ever
and it was
happened.
parental notification. And we passed it by what? 1 vote or 7 votes?
It was really
It's a very low
close,
margin.
Wicked close.
Yeah.
The margins we have today are profound compared to back then.
Yeah.
Good thing nobody said recount. Never mind.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, let's talk about redress of grievances. I was struck today. Not today, but I have been struck for a while. People should strike me on a regular basis, actually.
Intermittently.
Yeah,
striking,
intermittently.
Yeah.
Both
No.
sides of the face. You're leading us. You're egging us on
my
here.
feelings, Paul. Anyway, Bill of Rights, Amendment 1. Congress shall make no law respecting and establishing of religion or the prohibition of free exercise thereof, or abridge the freedom of speech or of press, or of the right of people to peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. And it's funny because one thing that struck me was that all of the other ones people talk about all the time,
Yes.
but the redress of grievances you almost never even hear about.
Most people don't even know what it means. It's like it's that flower. It sounds like that flowery language in the Constitution that
Right.
doesn't get used
Yes.
in everyday conversation.
Yeah.
Because the federal government doesn't actually go out and have a big department that you go out and say, you know what? When everything else fails, go here. See, that's the federal Constitution. And it's a great idea to say we're going to hold your government accountable. But, let's actually make the line really difficult to find to begin with.
Right.
Because it's inconvenient. It's like the Ninth Amendment to the Constitution. The Supreme Court didn't touch it for 120 years because nobody actually wanted to understand the power that it entailed. In New Hampshire, we haven't had an active committee like this
No.
in years and years and years. But once we did, once we actually have one that is taking House bills and this kind of stuff, people who are going out and saying, we have problems, are coming out of the woodwork. And it's not that all of the problems we're getting are radically different. They're very similar, which means we have a systemic failure in government to address the needs of some groups of people,
Right.
but they haven't had a voice before. why is it that there's no complaint department in the State House?
Right.
Well, there is. It's called the Redress of Grievances Committee.
Yeah.
You know what the point is, though? In representative government, there is still this concept that, yeah, the people rule, but the word rule has been an annoying one. You know, and Mrs. Obama actually said, it's our turn to rule. And, you know, the mentality of ruling is a really onerous concept.
Yeah.
In a free society, governments don't rule. You don't even notice they're there, ideally. They manage to take criminals off the street. But what
Well, you
now we
hope.
have today is this incredible amount of law, and they're ruling. And so there's this. But you see, in a representative government, what you have is not just the operation of the law and the creation of law and all that sort of stuff, but you have response. It's truly responsive government. So, complaint department, if you want to call it that, yeah. And so you now have this place where people can say, yeah, we sent you up there to do this, and now it's killing us, and let me show you how.
Yeah.
And why? How wonderful. No, truly responsive, truly representative.
Yeah.
That's the feedback you need. But you made a point earlier, that's the federal reading, right? It's the federal law there.
Correct.
It's never been used.
No.
There are these people now who've just sued for the right to redress over now 7 or 8 different points. They want redress over the like 400 questions about the income tax. They have one on, well, the list goes on and on. I've forgotten the whole long list, but
Right.
but they can't get answers to basic questions.
Right.
Nobody will answer, and anybody who knows about some of the issues they're relating to know that if you write to your congressman, and I've done it in some cases, I've written to my congressman, I said, this is problematical. Can you tell me the law relating to this? And you get a letter back. It's a form letter from the agency telling you to go to hell, basically. I mean, they're basically
Right.
showing you better just bow.
Yeah. No.
And
yeah,
you said, no, I didn't ask you for that. I asked you for a copy of the law.
Yeah.
And so these people, many of us have seen this in different areas, and now these guys who are actually suing, this guy out of New York who's been very successful suing the state of New York, is now doing it to the feds, suing for the right to redress and trying to get it before the Supreme Court.
I'd like to give us a simple explanation of redress. It really was kind of cool. A lot of the issues we had in redress last year, and I'm not taking credit for being there because I was still working full-time then, and Paul was doing a great job. I showed up sporadically. I couldn't get there all the time.
Right.
The Speaker of the House then had us meet, like, not even in the regular State House building. It was like across the street in the back in the corner in the dark because they didn't want anything to do with us. But,
You know,
but-
I should correct you on that, though. Actually,
No?
That wasn't so much the problem. But we wound up with, for example, because of inexperience, maybe in other things, we wound up with being unable to contact. You know, people wouldn't call us back who were chairman of rooms. You couldn't get rooms, so we wound up through hook and crook finding out that we could get into the executive office building annex and hold our meetings there. So it really wasn't organized as far as we knew. There wasn't anything like that. So just so you know, I mean, but we did wind up there
I
more
like
than
the way
once.
I said it better.
Yeah, there's more of an evil empire mentality to that, isn't there?
Yes.
Which
yes.
makes for better television.
Yeah, it's better television,
Yeah, yeah.
more exciting.
It's all about the ratings.
That's right.
But
We're going to be rated crazy if we keep this up.
no. I'm already there. I'm there.
Yeah, they've been watching him a long time.
Yeah. But a lot of the cases we heard, and this is part of the problem because we were told that there is no need for a redress committee because you can redress the government by filing suit against the government. The problem with that theory is, A, you've got to hire a lawyer typically, and who the heck has the money for that? And B, you're going through the court system, and a lot of the problems we're having, the people that are having difficulty are with the court system.
Yes.
Right.
So it's there's a conflict of interest, so they have no avenue. But a simple one that I really love this one was last year there was a gentleman that came from Freedom. Is that where Dan Freedom or Fremont? Where does Dan
Fremont.
Representative Itzel?
Fremont.
Has a variety store. And just before the variety store is a bridge that goes over the river. And they needed to put in a new bridge, so the Corps of Engineers went in, and I think they probably used the copy and paste method of engineering. Copied and pasted a bridge. This will cover this span. Put it in, and next thing you know, the guy's property is being eroded at such a great rate that he's got to spend thousands and thousands of dollars trying to keep his store from falling in the river.
Oh, wow.
And they didn't know what was going on, and,
Yeah.
and finally the guy started did his own research. I don't know who did it, but what it was is the the old guys that had built that bridge originally had angled the pillars and the support pillars so that, or not pillars, but the supporting structure, so that as the water went through, on one side it was narrower, so it accelerated the water. On the side of the river where his store was, it was wider, so it slowed the river down.
Yeah.
So it actually slowed the water down going around in front of his property because it was designed properly by the old school method.
Right.
And so he didn't have any issues. But when they just made those piers straight, the water just jetted right in and tore the guy's property up. He approached the town. The town said, "No, it's fine." You know, water must have sped up.
Well,
Well,
you know, water.
global warming.
Sometimes it'll speed up.
Yeah, you know how random that is.
Yeah.
And so he came before the committee, and I thought that was very interesting. I think we ended up with a reasonable solution for the gentleman too, but I
Yeah,
don't
but
remember.
we
how
didn't, to make it clear, we didn't have a committee, we had a caucus. It was,
Caucus.
that
Yeah,
was one of
they
the
wouldn't let us call
obstacles.
ourselves a committee then.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that actually is reasonable because we are called, all the rest of our activities are called committees, and for us to call it a committee, you know, you're obviously out here on the street and you're always thinking committee, you don't mean government, but when you get there and you're actually a rep, committee is a very specific thing. So they were right about that, but a caucus was not named too, it's just what they suggested, so we went with that. But just, you know, but in that case there, though, what happened, and this is, I think, one of the keys about redress, that the town and other people got interested in seeing if they could do something and working together and talking and that sort of thing. And you don't have to have a hammer at the other end. What you have to have is people saying, yes, we've got a problem, and they've been, by, you know, going through the natural course of things, finding that they did everything and they couldn't get an actual response. And then so this got to a point where there was some conversation reopened. And I'm not sure how it is today, but I think something is going on.
I think he was.
Has he been fixed?
It was addressed, but I don't recall.
But we've seen that in other areas. We're seeing decisions, we're seeing some interesting resignations where people have been named, where somebody's looking to impeach and things like that. So, you know, I think the effect is nothing to do with us or power. It has everything to do with people doing things. I think Jefferson said, people doing things that are going to be seen by the public. Jefferson, I think, said, nothing ultimately may keep the government officials in order as much as public opinion. And this is a public forum, and I think the most important aspect of it is its publicity, it's the fact that it's public. And where it comes forward in a petition, or at least the pages related to the petition, there's going to be names on it, and there's going to be attached things like failure to provide due process, and there'll be a judge's name or a marital master's name, and all those sorts of things begin to add up, you know. And in one case where there's an impeachment as a result of some of these listenings, we had to call them listenings, but we
That's actually so funny. At least somebody was. I mean, how often in the
But I
government?
love the word listenings.
Yeah,
It's
it's
very
pretty
pretty.
good.
Yeah, it's very sweet. Yeah, and it does the job.
But it's always better to be heard.
Yeah, it's good to be heard. Our job was to listen, and they were heard. But it led to eventually to an impeachment attempt that was passed last year by this House regarding a marital master who's had many cases, more by many numbers than any other marital master, go back to the Supreme Court for corrections and have come back corrected. You know.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's one of the things I saw up there when we were having our caucus. Was it again?
Caucus, yeah.
Caucus. Was
Listenings.
that there was a consistent problem with specifically the dairy court. I think I forget what the number is, but something like 25% of all the complaints that people had about their court case were in the dairy court, and it's only one of, I don't know even how many.
23 or so, 27, some
Yeah,
20s number.
It's an absurd number of how much problems people were having in that one particular area.
Yeah.
Right.
So
It was, yeah.
it's through the redress, because currently they have a judicial conduct committee, but that's run by the courts. So people weren't getting any satisfaction there.
Right, yeah.
In fact, if you were a lawyer and you filed a complaint with the Judicial Conduct Committee, you're actually doing any clients that you have in the future a disservice. Because the judges are gonna resent you
Right.
for attacking one of their own.
Right.
It's an odd thing. Yeah, it's an odd thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same thing, the reason we have police departments that go bad, or the Catholic and some priesthoods and stuff like that. It's the same problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is people get, their loyalty becomes to themselves and to each other, and they lose track of what they're really there for.
Yeah.
And they just start, you know, a circle in the wagon, regardless of the accuracy or truth behind the allegations. And
Right. They close ranks.
they close ranks,
Yeah.
and it just leads to further corruption.
Right.
Have you explained what our Constitution says about redress, though? Has that come up?
No, I haven't. Go.
Well, it's just that we have 2 points. It's Articles 31 and 2, and if anybody wants to see a piece of beautiful writing, so to speak, the 1 point clarifies that the people have the right to get redress of their grievances. Redress, by the way, is the response that fixes. You know what I mean? Redress doesn't mean you get to be heard. It means you get to actually have it addressed in a way that makes for the corrections. The problem the founders had, of course, they couldn't get anybody to fix it. They just said, no, we're doing what we're going to do. We're keeping on doing what we're going to do, you know. We require that. The second part requires us to provide it. So the first, you understand what I'm saying?
Right.
It's quite beautiful, yeah.
Well-
So we have the responsibility to provide for the redress. They have the right to redress, to bring in grievances, and do remonstrances and all that sort of whatever that is. You know,
We-
good word.
We heard from the lawyer from the Supreme Court the other day that the Constitution trumps the law and the rules implemented by departments in the state.
Yep.
So,
Well,
you know,
who said that?
the lawyer for the Supreme Court who came before our committee,
What's his name?
Howie Zibel,
Is it-
Yeah, that's Zibel,
That's
yeah.
correct. Yep,
okay?
yep.
And he and I actually had some really great discussion.
Yeah.
Yes.
Some
He told,
spirited debate.
But it is actually, that's something that shouldn't be glossed over. It is really important that people understand that the Constitution is the law, period.
Right.
Anything below that is trumped by the Constitution.
yeah.
Right.
And so I asked him point blank, I said, what is it about our system of government that says we have people going to jail who are being put in jail because of the contents of a sealed envelope, when our Constitution guarantees their right to challenge all accusers? And he gave me the best answer I've ever heard, and it made me sadder than any day.
Really.
He said, well, it would be really nice if our government worked like they taught you in the 4th grade. I said that. Remember that?
I'm sorry, you said that or he
I
said it?
asked, I said that, he said it would be really nice if our government worked the way
Yes, yes.
that we read about in the 4th grade.
Yes, yes.
And my response made me really happy all of a sudden. I wanted to do a little jig
Yeah.
because I said,
Oh,
what
yeah,
do we
you-
have to do as a legislature to get back to that?
Right.
Because
Well-
that's why they sent me to Concord. That's why they sent a lot of us to Concord.
Yeah, and you said
Yeah.
something also later, maybe at lunch or something. And it was actually an absolute reflection of something I said when I was a young person when we were being drafted into the undeclared, unconstitutional Vietnam War.
Right.
And we were drafted, and when I got there, I asked this captain said to us, so you guys are going to go out and you're going to provide liberty for the Cambodians. And I said, wait a minute. You just locked me in here and threw away the key for 2 years, and that's so I can give liberty to somebody? And he said, isn't there a little something wrong with this picture?
Yeah.
And I said, how can you explain that to him? And his answer was a very interesting one. You know what it was? I'll talk to the commanding officer and give you an answer tomorrow.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, what could be more self-evident? This guy was a good soldier, by the way. He was a good soldier. He
Yes.
did good work as a soldier, and he loved being a soldier. I loved him. I mean, I loved him for what he was.
Yeah.
But this concept that we're dealing with right now is not an acceptable way of dealing. And I said to myself many years before, and around that time, I said, all I want is the liberties that we were told about when we were children. All I want is that world, because they weren't wrong about that being the inspiration. And the fact is, they were quoting the founders when they were talking about it. That's what most of us on this side of the aisle are up there for this year. Most of us are liberty-minded, Constitution first, limited government Republicans. And that's the difference. But that inspired me at that moment. That was a beautiful moment.
An epiphany.
Well,
yeah.
it's really funny when you look at government and this idea that government constructs by its own devices bureaucracy, which actually distances us from the simple intention of the Constitution. The Article 2 of the New Hampshire Constitution describes your natural rights. It says you have the right to life, liberty, and property. In summary.
Yeah.
Article 3 is way cooler. It says that you surrender some of those rights so that you can belong to a civilized society. But when that is no longer valid, the surrender is void. The third item, not the Third Amendment, but the third item in our Constitution says, you know what, you give up this for that. But when you don't, it's not a fair exchange. We have an article in our Constitution that says we have a right to revolution when the government no longer serves us. Now, I'm not
It
suggesting
doesn't
that's a
actually
good
say
idea.
that, but
Right.
close.
No.
Pretty
It
close.
depends on, well, it says when the government is no longer actually meeting the needs of the people have a right to either change the government or revolt.
Yeah.
Yeah, when they've exhausted basically all
remedy.
Right.
remedy, in fact, not only does it say you have the right to revolt, it's basically you are
It's slavish.
Responsible.
It's slavish not to. I think is the
slavish
phrase.
not to.
Yeah,
In other
yeah,
words,
yeah.
you are not fulfilling your role as a citizen to not revolt
Yeah,
when
yeah,
government has become too oppressive.
That's true.
But, so the idea that I was trying to get to in that particular angle is, I'm not suggesting that we all want to do that, but while we're up there and being representatives, we need to look at how much bureaucracy we've put in the way. And, you know, I'm ready to change my middle name. I mean, I really am. You just call me Repeal. You can call me George Repeal Lambert, and I'll be happy, because we need to peel back the bureaucracy. What we did was well-intentioned. We went out and said, we want to solve X problem. And then we delegated broad-based rulemaking authority to departments who could construct not the constitutional guideline, not the law, but administrative rules. I heard a judge say to me one day, ignorance of the law is no excuse. Now, let me tell you, nobody scares me like a guy in a black robe.
Right.
Because that guy can throw me in jail
Right.
for contempt.
Right.
And I have a lot of contempt
Oh, I thought
for
you were
government
talking about
stupidity.
I thought you were talking about the flasher that's been.
Oh yeah. Well, he's
Oh,
harmless.
that's a black coat.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Not the
Oh,
same
oh,
thing. It's a
oh.
rain slick.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, it's good. I'm scared of contempt,
Yeah.
right? But those people can call me and say, you broke the rule. Except for the rule wasn't made by the Constitution. It wasn't made by amendment to the Constitution. It wasn't made by law. It was delegated to a department head who said, you know what, we can go make the world better because we're going to put in a rule.
Yeah. It's the utopian mindset taking over unknowingly. Our dream was liberty as the utopian concept. The dream now is this thing called equality and justice, and it actually has filled up our jails. We have 25% of the world's prison population, with 4% of the world's population in the United States of America today.
It's incredible.
25% in the land of liberty and New Hampshire. Listen, I want you all to guess. Today we have 3,000 people in jail on a given year. Guess how many we had in 1982?
I know.
You know, how many? Guess it. Guess a number. 3,000 today. 20 years ago. 30 years ago.
275.
Yeah, I've told you too, haven't I?
No,
That's
I
right. That's
guessed it.
exactly right. It's
Yeah.
280 people or some number like that.
Yeah.
And now,
that
now
was good.
look.
Good job,
You
Gary.
go back 150 years before that.
But we're safer today than we were then, right? I mean, we've gotten rid of all this violent crime.
Yeah, don't you feel safer?
I do.
Every time there's a knock on your door, don't you feel safer?
Actually-
no, you're not worried
actually,
about
I
you're not
don't.
worried about the criminals anymore. You're
No,
worried
I-
about the government knocking on your door.
Knowing all those pot
That's how
smokers
safer
are in
you're
prison.
feeling.
That's
What?
a good feeling.
Well, so actually,
Knowing all those pot smokers are in
Yeah,
prison.
the
is a
pot
good
smokers.
feeling,
Yeah, that's not good.
he told me about this, and I said, well, you know, that sounds really interesting, but, you know, I do feel safer. Because I remember Manchester in 1976. It was a scary, scary place.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are more gangs on the street in Manchester now than there were then, by a lot.
Probably. But, you know, violent crime was an issue back when I was really young.
Yeah.
I was in second grade in 1976. Okay, but when I was really, really young, you didn't go to Boston. You didn't go to major cities. You didn't go to New York. New York was a scary place so bad they made movies about it.
Right.
And then, you know,
Who's in
now
school
we
then?
feel safer.
New York.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Okay, I'm working with you. I have a lot of faith, don't I?
So, I said, well, but we've gotten rid of all these violent criminals. And he said, well, no, really, when you look at the numbers, violent crime dropped before that. We have been putting people in jail not for violent crime, but for violation of the rules.
Yes.
That's not the worst part. The worst part is the reincarceration rate in the state is nearly 80%. Once you've been put in, you're going back in within 3 years, 80% of the time. But you're not going in for a violent crime. You're not going in for doing something bad. You're going back in for a parole violation because you didn't show up for a meeting, because you got caught with a beer, you got caught with, marijuana is, one of the items. Okay? So things that are a small offense to the rest of the world put you right back in the system, and you don't come out. So we go from 280 people to 3,000. Well, guess what? They're expensive. We don't have enough jails. We're complaining about overpopulation, and the reason we're getting there is because we have a system that is administratively forcing people back in and not giving them an opportunity to be safe.
Right.
Okay, wait. A couple. We only have a few more minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry.
It's good stuff.
It's good stuff. It's informative stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the focus of this show. The
I
Constitution.
thought this was a joke show. I was starting off really good there.
No.
Now we're getting
well,
really
it
serious.
is.
I mean, this-
That's my part.
I'm
But
really
your
worried
part
about
was to
this.
inform.
Oh, that was my part?
Yeah.
Oh, I was the straight guy.
Yeah, you're the straight
Okay,
guy. The point of this show is our Constitution, our republic, cannot exist without two variables: an informed voting base and morality. Without those two, it can't exist.
Right.
It's gone. It's done. And so that's what this show's about, is to try to remedy at least half of that. Morality, you'll have to look elsewhere. But as far as it's like Representative Lambert said, ignorance of the law is no excuse. How many volumes of just New Hampshire law do we have?
37 volumes.
Law or
Statutes,
Okay,
Oh, not regulations. That's a whole other one.
I know,
You know
that's
the
what I'm
number?
saying.
Oh, good.
Oh,
No,
I
I'm
don't
just-
know.
Go do his
I'm
first.
just talking about the law, the RSAs. How many volumes? Do you remember?
37 or 37,
37
38 now, maybe.
volumes
Yes, volumes.
of laws. I am sure that every citizen out there has read every single one of those, because
Oh,
that
yeah.
way they can say, well,
Yeah,
I'm
ignorance
not
of the law is no
I'm
excuse,
not
yeah.
ignorant of the law.
Yeah.
I have the
When
books on tape.
You
Yeah.
yeah.
You use those for going to sleep, I presume, because I've actually read them, and that works really well
Yes.
sometimes.
So that statement, ignorance of the law is no excuse. Well, it really
It's
is
a-
now.
right, yeah.
It
Hey,
really
I'm sure
is.
there's no connection. I'm sure there's no connection, Gary, but do you know how many books of law there were in 1960? I was told this by Soltani. How many statute books? We're
There
just
was
talking about
2.
37, 38?
There's
No,
2.
there were 6.
Oh,
That-
6?
But so I'm sure there's no relationship with the amount of people in jail and the amount of laws we have. I'm sure there's no connection, but nevertheress,
Well, there probably isn't, but
there are a
if you
number of
actually,
coincidences like that.
if you go out to the park today and you go out and you start puppeteering, okay? Under RSA 286:1, they can arrest you and put you in jail
Wow.
if you did it without a permit.
Yeah.
Whoa. Who in their right mind would puppeteer without a permit?
David Ridley.
Permission, yeah.
Oh, jeez. Well,
But the
that's-
first time I read that, what I thought was interesting is it's the responsibility of the selectmen of a town to enforce it. So
Right.
when we started having this at Litchfield, and I'm a selectman, I'm going, hey, we're going to enforce this. We're not having any of these public performances without a permit. And I've never seen so many lions from the Lions Club in a selectman. I mean, these guys packed the parking lot. There was standing room only because they're like, you're trying to get rid of our fundraisers. No, I'm not. I just want to follow the law.
Right.
If we don't like it, let's repeal it. But if
Right.
nobody's talking about it
Yeah, that's a
and
good
nobody's
point.
holding us accountable,
That's a good
we
point.
have this legacy law that doesn't do us any good.
Right.
Let's start with repeal.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And let's end with redress.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, quick. We only get
What
2
we're here
seconds.
for, right?
2 seconds. If somebody has an issue, and they've tried most other things, there are, like, if you have a problem with your police, you go to the police department first and talk to different people. If you still tried this, or you have problems with the judiciary, and you've tried everything you can to get help, you've tried making a complaint to the Judicial Conduct Committee and to no avail, it is then that you should contact your own legislator and ask them to talk with Paul, and through that process, their committee can actually hear that case if they,
Yeah.
I don't know when your
And-
deadline is.
Yeah, they don't have to talk to me, they have to go through a process, though.
Yes.
That's just a normal process.
But you don't have to go through your own legislator. If your legislator says, you know what, I don't like your issue,
You go to another.
you go to another one. There are 400 of them, and if you find somebody who likes your issue, they can bring a redress. It's not about location, it's all about result.
Yeah, buy them a hamburger.
Yeah, there you go. Or some lasagna, right?
Hamburger, cup of coffee,
Yeah.
you're good.
As long as it's under 25 bucks, is that the way it works?
Hey, thank you very much, gentlemen. Next week, we have Representative Kathleen Souza, who was a freshman legislator back in 2000 with me.
Now she's a freshman again.
She's a freshman again. She's very awesome. We're going to talk about we're going to get a little bit lighter because this is kind of a intense subject. We're going to go with fetal homicide.
Really?
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know how many
Wow.
unborn are killing people, but apparently it's a big problem, and we got to talk about it.
Well, it needs to be addressed.
Absolutely.
I don't
or
feel-
redressed. I don't know if
Well, I
it's
know.
addressed or redressed.
I don't feel safe near a pregnant woman.
I
because
don't
of
either.
that.
You
Yeah.
don't know. You just don't know.
Exactly, exactly. I'm terrified, frankly.
Thanks, guys.
Most welcome. Thank you for inviting us.
I guess we're done. See y'all next week.